Hi, Dr. Sasse here from Sasse Surgical in Northern Nevada. I had some questions about gastric bypass, and particularly what if I had gastric bypass or my loved one had gastric bypass many years ago and I had regained the weight. Is there any kind of second bite at the apple? Is there a second chance at losing those pounds again and getting back to that enjoyed good health and more energy and active life and adding some years? So the short answer is yes. So I'm going to just kind of describe the way we have approached it and how we've found success at revising gastric bypass. But let me kind of describe a little bit about how we've gotten there first before I get to the punchline, so hang in there. The gastric bypass works by one primary mechanism, and this is often kind of contrary to what you might read. The conventional wisdom for 50 years was that these procedures worked by two mechanisms which probably don't actually play much role. The first is by restricting the food or the calories that we take in. That actually may play some role. And the second mechanism was thought to be malabsorption, or basically the calories would go through our system, but we would bypass the absorptive area of the intestine and we'd poop all those calories out and we would never absorb them. So we were kind of sneaking them past our absorptive system. And there's pretty good data now from animal and human studies that that probably does not play any role, or if it plays any role at all, it's minuscule. The role of restriction probably plays some role, especially in the very beginning, like in the early months after gastric bypass surgery. So how in the heck does it actually work then? Well, the way it really works is by changing the hormonal chemistry, the hormone family that regulates body weight and blood sugar and fat storage and triglycerides, this whole important family of metabolic regulation. And that is primarily regulated by a family of hormones, some of which we know the names of and some of which we kind of see how they are shifted after gastric bypass surgery or after sleeve gastrectomy. They include hormones like PYY, hormones like GLP-1, hormones like ghrelin, hormones like leptin. Those hormones really shift dramatically after we go and change the tissues, either by bypassing part of them or by trimming off part of the stomach tissue. So that hormonal change seems to be very long-lasting. That seems to be mostly a lifelong change, and it mostly correlates to the lifelong benefits of those procedures. But as we know, people can regain their weight for a lot of other reasons because it's complicated. We play a role. We may not be super motivated. We might eat and drink too much or eat and drink too many carbs. We might not exercise enough. So we clearly play some role. But then there's also a lot of environmental influences, the same chemicals and the same factors that are in the food supply and the pharmaceuticals, all the things that are causing us to have weight gain that are hijacking our biology are still out there. So depending on your genetic susceptibility, how hard you work at it, and just the luck of your genetics, you may be regaining that weight through no fault of your own. So now, as I've kind of described the background, let me come back around to how we can revise or fix the gastric bypass to make it more effective now, jumpstart that weight loss, and really give someone a second chance, a new lease on life. It's done by thinking of the gastric bypass like the letter Y. Think of the upper arms of the Y as the two limbs of the bypass, and they join together. And this was basically the construct of, Professor Roux of Roux and Y gastric bypass. So one limb is where the food comes down. We eat, comes down our esophagus, and then through the stomach pouch, and then down, and then it joins together where it's all absorbed. The other limb, however, has always been neglected. We didn't really think it was very important. For many years, no one really paid any attention to it. But we now think that is probably the most critical part of the whole operation for shifting those hormones and causing the long-term weight loss. So in the old days, we made that limb pretty short because it was comfortable to plug it in where it was comfortable. And that was about 30 centimeters long, or really whatever was comfortable when you looked at each person's anatomy. But now we know that if you make that limb a lot longer, say 100 centimeters, or even longer still, 125 or perhaps even longer, now you have really shifted those hormones because all of that length is bypassed and none of it has food that is sort of tickling or stimulating the internal lining. And this is what causes that shift to more favorable hormonal profile, resulting in lowered blood sugar, lower triglycerides, lower fat storage, and yes, lower body weight. So the procedure that has been the most successful has been to revise the old length of the limb here, and that limb goes by a couple of names, but we like to use the word PD limb or pancreaticoduodenal limb. That's fairly widely used in the literature. And so we like to disconnect it and then remeasure and make it a lot longer and then reconnect it. And lo and behold, that tends to shift the hormones, and most people have a pretty significant, profound weight loss afterward. We can sometimes boost those results by going up and tightening the stomach pouch itself if it has some enlargement or extra capacity. Possibly we could tighten the outlet of the stomach pouch as well, but as you can hear me saying, that probably does not play a very big role. That procedure goes by no consistent name in the published peer-reviewed medical literature, but a few authors use the word distalization, and that means making the plug-in point more distal or lower down or farther down along the intestinal path. And so that distalization procedure has been quite successful. It's not perfect because, again, everybody's biology is different, but what it does seem to be is very safe. It's pretty straightforward. Once you've done this 100 times or more, this is a pretty straightforward, very safe, simple procedure and has very low risk to it. And it does not seem to evolve or evoke a lot of side effects. You might think that if you're making the bypass much more aggressive, that you might get more bypass side effects such as diarrhea or malabsorption or lowered vitamin levels. And what we've found over the last 5 years or so is that really does not seem to be the case. So there may be a limit where if we make that limb much longer, that we will start to encounter more side effects like diarrhea and malabsorption of nutrients and vitamins. But we haven't seen that very much at all in practice. So this seems to be a pretty good sweet spot for something that's very safe, simple, low invasiveness, but yet is very effective at shifting the hormones and resulting in a real improvement and indeed delivering for most people, giving them that second chance, that new lease on life. So I would just say that, you know, if you find yourself in that boat, or your loved one finds yourself in that boat where, geez, I had gastric bypass 20 years ago, it worked great for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but I've recently regained those pounds and I'm being told that there's really not something that can be done. I would just say, research that a little bit more. This is perhaps not as widely known everywhere, but there are definitely centers that have the expertise that we do and that can safely do this procedure and really result in some excellent improved health and longevity, really reverse that diabetes, that blood pressure, take some pressure off those knees and feet and back, and add some years to life. So I hope that's been helpful in clarifying that yes, indeed, there is a good avenue for revising gastric bypass today, and I wish you the very best in health.